You'll know Howard's work if you've been involved in Megalithomania. He came here in 2009, 2011, I think also 2017. So he's a regular at Megalithomania. He lives in Plournel in Brittany, near the Carnac alignments and the megalithic stones. Myself and John Martineau and Robin have been over there many times exploring the area with Howard. He's released several books looking at the Carnac alignments, also the Nebra sky disk, and numerous other publications in French, but he's also translated many of them into English, and his new book sets to be a bestseller. It looks absolutely amazing. I've had a chance to have a look at it, and you can click through to Howard's website. The details are in the lecture to get hold of exclusive signed numbered copies of that. He also runs a summer solstice event in Plournel to look at some of the alignments as they take place. Almost every year he's been doing that for the last decade. And he's also got a new movie out, and this is like a documentary kind of stroke movie, which again, the information will be shared in the lecture, and that's got major crowdfunding. It's got a lot of interest and shows some of the discoveries, some of the really important breakthrough discoveries that Howard has made. So without further ado, let's welcome Howard Crowhurst.
Well, thank you very much, Hugh. I'm very pleased to be back at Megalithomania for the fourth time. It's a very special year for me this year, 2021. I'm bringing out a full-length feature film over 2 hours long about the megaliths called Megalith's Forgotten World. And I'm also bringing out, well, it's already out now, my book called The Megalithic Plan, which I've been working on for about 10 years. It's over 400 pages. This talk is going to be showing extracts from the film and also showing basically what this book is about. So let's get started. I've got quite a lot to say in quite a short time, so I hope we're going to be able to get through this completely. Right, so what I'm going to do to start off with is to show you an extract from the film about Carnac and the 3-4-5 triangle. I've already presented this subject at Megalithomania, and this extract is about 6 minutes long and gives a very concise presentation of my work on this subject. So let's get started. 7,000 years ago in the south of Brittany in France, in the region around Carnac, began the construction of the largest megalithic complex in the world. In an area stretching from the eastern coast of the Gulf of Morbihan to the Quiberon Peninsula, on a territory of about 200 square kilometers, there are still 6 large stone alignments and several remains of smaller alignments. 7 massive tumuli. At least 10 cromlechs or stone circles. 2 quadrilateral enclosures. More than 200 dolmens, 5 of which contain numerous engravings, and many of which still have their dry stone cairns around them. And finally, countless solitary menhirs or standing stones. The largest is the Grand Menhir Brisé at Loch-Maria-Cair, now recumbent but once standing almost 20 meters high. Others still upright are up to 6.5 meters high, like the one at Cair-Zéro. These alignments at Cair-Zéro in Erdeven are made up of 9 lines of menhirs, which are oriented exactly on the east-west axis. And even though some of them have been destroyed because a road was built through them, their orientation remains obvious. There are so many megaliths in this region that a lot have been abandoned. It is estimated that about 90% of these monuments have disappeared. Early drawings and engravings of the sites give a very different impression to what we see now, with megaliths stretching as far as the eye can see, omnipresent in the landscape. It's easier to imagine the initial splendor of this architecture from another era. So what happened here? Why were hundreds of thousands of tons of stone quarried and transported to form lines, curves, chambers and hills? What was the point of it all? Carnac was carefully selected for the implantation of these giants. This place has very special characteristics that are linked to its latitude. They come from Astro-Geometry, an ancient science, now forgotten, which gives a special character to a place from the fact that the sun and or the moon trace a geometric shape on the horizon by the extreme positions of their rising and setting. On 2 days each year, the 21st of March and the 23rd of September, everywhere on Earth there are 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of night, hence the word equinox. Nights equal to days. On these days the sun rises exactly in the east and sets exactly in the west all over the planet. On the days following the equinoxes, the sunrises and sunsets progressively move away from the east-west axis to extreme points where they stop for a few days. That's why the length of the day varies. In fact, the movement of the rising sun along the horizon is like the swing of a pendulum. There are pauses, accelerations, and decelerations. The longest and shortest days of the year are called solstices. In Latin, this means sun stops. June the 21st is the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, and December the 21st is the winter solstice. These days correspond to the position of sunrise and sunset on the horizon when they are at their extreme limits. The rising sun is furthest from the east-west axis. The further away you are from the equator, the greater these variations become. At the latitude of Carnac, when the monuments were built, the sun traced a very particular geometric shape. The position of its rising at the equinox on the east-west axis, and the position of its rise at the summer solstice, the extreme northern position of its annual movement, formed the exact angle of a 3-4-5 triangle. Incredible as it may seem, the megalith builders must have known this, and they used this fact to determine the cardinal axes. They must have chosen the latitude of Carnac on purpose. They consciously implanted here humanity's first large-scale monumental architecture, and nobody seems to talk about it, apart from a few rare exceptions. The 3-4-5 triangle axis is very visible in the Kermario alignments at Carnac. But what's so special about a 3-4-5 triangle? They seem to have gone to great lengths to make it central to their constructions. We learned that the 3-4-5 triangle is the first triangle of Pythagoras, the Greek scientist who lived 2,500 years ago. I found out since that this triangle was already well known before that, since the Sumerians had written it on their tablets, which are 3,500 years old. The elevation of the central pyramid of the Giza Plateau is also structured according to this triangle, and this pyramid is over 4,500 years old. According to Plutarch, a Greek philosopher from the 1st century, the Egyptians hold the 3-4-5 triangle, the most beautiful of triangles, in the highest regard, inasmuch as they compare it to the very nature of the universe. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. There'll be another extract a little later on. I'm going to be talking quite a lot about geometry and angles, and so I'd like to start off first of all with just a little explanation about how angles can be measured from north. If we take north as 0, then on Google Earth, which I'll be using, all the angles given are given from north. And so just a little recap on how this works. If you go towards the right for 45 degrees, then that's quite clear, you're at a 45 from north, and then 90 degrees. When you get past 90 degrees, then it's going to be 135 degrees. This is 45 degrees south of east, 135 degrees from north. And this principle continues, 180 towards the south, 225 towards the southwest, 270 towards the west, and 315 towards the northwest. So it's just to remind you how this angle system works, so that when we go on Google Earth, you'll be able to see. Now, for the 3-4-5 triangle, this gives us 8 possible angles. The 2 basic angles, firstly, from north will be 53-13 degrees, which is if we go from north to like the summer solstice angle at Carnac, then that gives us a 53.13 degrees angle. But if we take this angle, say, for the sunset at winter solstice, that will give us 233.13 from north, and summer solstice sunset 306.87. Okay, now if we take a 3-4-5 triangle in the other, orientated with the 4 side north-south, 3 east-west, then this from north gives us an angle of 36.87, and then these different angles here. So that's just a preview. We'll have a see how this is going to be set up. The first thing I want to talk to you about is a line linking 2 sites. The first one on the left is Brittany. It's one of the biggest standing stones in southern Brittany. It's called the Gulvarmenia. It's at the tip of the Quiberon Peninsula and one of the most southerly points of Brittany. Here's a photograph of it at summer solstice at midday with a very short shadow. And it's over 6 meters tall, and they're about 2 meters in the ground because the sand, it's near the beach, the sand over the centuries has mounted up, and there's over 2 meters underground. And then on the right here we have the Castle Rig Stone Circle near Keswick in Cumbria, a beautiful spot. I hope you know it. And what we're going to look at now is the link between these 2 things. This is going to be one of the major principles in the book, is how meridian lines of very long distances link sites together. So we're going to switch now to Google Earth and have a look at exactly how this works. So we come to this map of the British Isles and Brittany, and we're going to zoom straight into the Gulvarmenia, which is down here at the tip of the Quiberon Peninsula. If we zoom in, we'll see it immediately above it. Here's its shadow. And if I put a line on here, and then we're going to run up to Castle Rig Stone Circle. Here it is, seen from Google Earth. And I'd like you to look at the angle involved here. You can see that the heading on the north of the screen, you can see the heading is exactly 360 degrees. this is a perfect north-south relationship to 1/100th of a degree precision. Now, of course, it's possible to say that if you go from one site to another, then you're bound to find somewhere along the line, you're bound to find a site which is perfectly positioned. That's not true. Just try it. Start somewhere, draw a perfect north-south line and see if you find another megalithic site. Here, these two sites are perfectly linked together with a precision to 1/100th of a degree from the centre of Castle Rigg to this standing stone, over a distance of 793 kilometres. Now, if we look at Brittany here, a very strange thing which I've pointed out in a talk I've done is that this happens to be the longest north-south line you can draw through Brittany. We're going from the most southern point, right at the tip of the Quiberon Peninsula, the most southern point in Brittany, and if you see, it goes through here to the most northern point in Brittany, which is here, the most northern point of the Brittany mainland. So this is the longest north-south line you can draw through Brittany. And I'll come back to this point later. It goes from the most southern point in Brittany to the most northern point in Brittany, and it is perfectly north-south, okay, which is a very strange coincidence. It's also interesting to point out that the Quiberon Peninsula is linked to the mainland by an isthmus, a very thin plot of land here. And if we go up to the very most northern point, we'll see that there is another link here, linking these more northern islands. These two things are perfectly north-south of each other, which they're the unique, only two isthmuses like that exist in Brittany. So this is the line linking Castle Rigg to Gulvarmenia. Now, if we zoom back down to Castle Rigg, if I draw a line from here now, if I put my point on here, so let's clear this off, and I'll put another point here, and let's go up to Maes Howe. Here you can see the hill of Maes Howe, the mound with its entrance here in Orkney, right near here, the ring of Brogar, the stones of Stennes. Now the angle here is 359.40 degrees, so this is not a perfect north-south, it's 0.6 degrees off a perfect north-south relationship. But this gives us a line, if I add the Gulvar to Castle Rigg line on here, this gives us a north-south line from southern Brittany right up to Maes Howe, which is very, very close to being perfectly north-south. If I go from Gulvar up to Maes Howe without going through Castle Rigg, then the angle is 359.77 with 0.23 degrees off a perfect north-south axis. And this is over a distance of 1,282 kilometers. Okay, so if now we come back to our slideshow, we can see that this Orkney Meridian, 1,283 kilometers, Castle Rigg divides it according to the golden ratio. This is an incredible fact, 793 kilometers from the Gulvar to Castle Rigg line and 490 kilometers from Castle Rigg to Maes Howe. That gives us 1.618 relationship. I can't go into all the details about the golden ratio now, but it's a specific way of dividing a line into two parts. Let's look at the Maes Howe geometry. This is a plan done by Victor Rice many years ago, and which shows the angles of the diagonals. Maes Howe has got a very long corridor, and towards the end of this corridor there are two stones here, which can be seen to be jutting out slightly on either side of the corridor. Now, if we look at line, what he called line A here in green, this is the diagonal line which goes from the entrance. If you're outside, the right-hand side of the entrance goes in, touches on this stone and goes back into the chamber at the back. Now, so this is the most angled line, most far from west line that you can draw here. And I've put out the different angles that Victor Rice gives here. On a compass, he got for line A 218, 217 on maps and photos with a theodolite 215. Now the angle of a 345 triangle taken from north here is 216.87. So basically this line A touching on the corner of this stone and the entrance here has a 3x4 angle to it. 3, 4, 5 angle to it. And here we can see the photos of these stones which jut out and see how the sun's rays light them up, and from that point then the light goes into the back of the chamber. And when the sun is setting, the last moment of sunset, this gives this image taken by Charles Tate many years ago of the sun's last rays coming right into the end of the chamber. Now this particular principle is used also in Gavrinis in Brittany, and well, many dolmens in Brittany, southern Brittany. One of the most well-known is the Gavrinis cairn, which is like Maeshowe. It's a long corridor and a chamber. This corridor is 13 meters long, whereas Maeshowe is about 16 meters long. But it's the same thing. This is orientated to winter solstice sunrise. When the sun rises, it comes in on the diagonal. And then there's this stone slightly jutting out here, and you can see this on the photo. This stone is lit up, and I've witnessed this several times at winter solstice. And the first deep red rays of light hit this stone, and then as the sun comes up over the horizon, the light shoots from this stone and into the chamber. This is the exact angle of a 3-4-5 triangle from north, but this time it's 3x4. Okay. So 3 north-south, 4 east-west. About, well, 3,820 meters to the west of Gavrinis, we have another very well-known monument called La Table des Marchands, with a beautiful engraved ogival stone here with its central axis and symmetrical engravings on either side. In my book, I go into the details of this and the numbers involved here. But for the time being, I'd just like to point out that again, the sun comes in on the diagonal here and lights up the left-hand side of this stone. Exactly the same principle with the exact angle of a 3-4-5 triangle again. So what we discover is that on a north-south line, so from the most southerly point of Brittany to the most northerly point of the British Isles here in Orkney, on this north-south line, well, on the south of it, in the Carnac area, the solstice sunset or sunrise gives us a 3-4-5 triangle with 3 north and 4 east-west. And when we get up to Orkney, because of the difference in latitude, the sun's angle is much different. The days are much shorter in winter and much longer in summer. And so the angle from east-west here is a 3-4-5 triangle, this time turned round. Okay, so that the 4 side is north-south and the 3 side east-west. This is a very important point. It must be stressed that it's not very well known, and it's very important to realize that this principle creates a territory in which most of these megalithic constructions are going to take place. I'd like now to come to another place in Scotland called the Balnuaran cairns, Balnuaran of Clava cairns, often called the Clava cairns, near Inverness. This is a beautiful photo taken by Phil Hindle. Thank you, Phil, for letting me use this. And this is a photo of winter solstice sunset in the axis of one of the cairns. The cairns are circular, and there are 3 cairns. 2 of them have corridors oriented in the same direction, and the third one has no corridor. It's a circular monument with no access to the center. We'll see them in an aerial image in a second, but I just want you to see this, how the sun at winter solstice seems to be setting exactly in the axis of this corridor. And I'll come back to this in a minute. Here we can see the cairns from above. I'll circle them so you can see them. It's the northeast cairn here, the southwest cairn, and the central cairn here, which has no corridor. The little dark line here is the corridor which goes into it, and the central one has no corridor. These cairns are surrounded by standing stones. You can see them here. Around each one has a circle of stones around it. Very interesting organisation. Professor Tom indicated that these two cairns with their corridors were orientated towards winter solstice sunset. And I must say I disagree with this. I think this is slightly in error, and I'll show you why now. If we link these two cairns together, we can see that the corridors are orientated in the same way. And so what is this angle? First of all, here's another photo by Phil Hindle. This is taken in the northeast cairn, and you can see here how the sun is setting, not exactly in the axis of the cairn, but slightly to the right. Now, this slight difference to the right is very important because one must be clear that if the builders were orientating this towards winter solstice sunset, then it's a very easy thing to do to align yourself on a winter solstice sunset. There's no reason that this should be off by several degrees. Okay, this must be exact. And if we look into, I'm going to zoom in here into this photo, we can see the southwest cairn here in the foreground. There are some standing stones which belong to the central cairn. And we can see that the sun here is setting off. Here's the major axis. And the sun is setting off here to the right of this. If we look at the angle between these cairns, we're going to discover that it's a 3-4-5 triangle exactly. This line is drawn to slightly to the north of the corridors, so we can see them both. And the exact angle given here, 216.87 degrees. That's 180 plus 36.87 degrees. That's the exact angle to 100th of a degree of a 3-4-5 triangle. I think this is the first time anybody has ever presented this. And what's important to realize is that the sun at this latitude will never set at that angle. Here we are again in the corridor. If we look at the axis to the corridor and where the sun is setting, there's a 5-degree difference here between the axis of the corridor and where the sun sets at winter solstice. 5 degrees is a long way off the angle. There's no reason that there should be that difference, and it's not linked to the date. Here I've worked out the angles with the slope. Here you can see the Banuaran cairns are here on the left. This is an exaggerated slope, of course, so that you can see the landscape. But there's a hill point, a high point at 291 meters high, 7 kilometers away, which gives an angle of 132. From that, we can calculate the exact angle of sunset at winter solstice. And we see here that at present date, it's 222.97 degrees. At winter solstice in 2000 BC, so 4,000 years ago, it was 221.74, which is a little over 1 degree less. From the 1 degree less from north, 1.2 degrees. That's the difference over 4,000 years, whereas the 3-4-5 triangle is 216.87 degrees. And so you can see there's a very big difference here, even at the time of 2000 BC. And if we go back further, right to the maximum of the Earth's inclination, when winter solstice would have been further south, this will be less than a degree. So the greatest angle from north that the sunset can be here is about 220.5. So it's way off the angle of the 3-4-5 triangle, which is the angle of these two cairns. So the question is, are these cairns pointing to something? If they're not pointing towards the winter solstice sunset, what could they be pointing to? And I think here you're going to be in for a big surprise. What we're going to discover is they're pointing to Ben Nevis, to the summit of Ben Nevis, which is over 94 kilometers away, the highest point in the British Isles. This is, of course, a very, very interesting and strange fact. And what's also very strange is that this line between the Banuaran and Clava cairns and Ben Nevis is exactly parallel to the Great Glen Fault, which is the deepest and widest, greatest fault line in the British Isles. There's Loch Ness in the middle with its very deep waters. And this is a very interesting fact. It's been seen, for example, that at Stonehenge, the avenue at Stonehenge is orientated along a kind of geological line which points towards the summer solstice sunrise. and other in the Carnac alignments, for example, the rocks fracturing, the begged rocks fracturing goes along the alignments on the angle of a 3-4-5 triangle. And so we see that there seems to be a very strong link between geological, major geological factors and this geometry, which goes a long way beyond our present day reasoning. Can't understand how this could possibly be linked. But anyway, here the Bagnora and Clavicanes point to Ben Nevis on the angle of a 3-4-5 triangle. Let's look at the exactitude of that. There's no visibility because the hills in the foreground, it can be seen here that these hills are higher. This is without taking into consideration the Earth's curvature, which would make it even more difficult. But, you know, even on a flat land, there's no visibility. So it's not as if one could see the summit of Ben Nevis. So this link isn't linked to visibility, okay? And from Ben Nevis, you can't see the Clavicanes, of course. Now, the angle taken in one direction, so from Ben Nevis to the Bagnora and Clavicanes, the angle from west is 36.36 degrees. If we take the angle in the other direction, it's 37.14. This is because Google Earth gives us the angle from the point we're looking at. So if we take it from one point, it will give us the angle towards the other point from where we're looking. And if we do it in the other direction, then it gives us the angle in the other direction. And because of the Earth's curvature, this angle is not exactly the same. So if you want to know the average angle between 2 points, you have to take the average, which is 36.75, compared to the 3-4-5 triangle, which is 36.87. This is 0.12 degrees difference. Okay, so it's very precise over such a distance. Now I'm going to look at another major feature of the British Isles. It's Cape Wrath, the very high cliffs of Cape Wrath. This is the most northerly, the most northwest point of the British mainland. And it's going to be seen it's a very important point in the megalithic structure that was put out over the British Isles. So we're going to go back to Google Earth now. So we're going to look at the relationship that there is between Cape Wrath. So I'll get rid of the lines we had before. Okay, and now let's go to see Cape Wrath here. If we come down, here's the point that I've chosen. Here we are. This is the point we saw on the photo. Here's the lighthouse here on the right. And this is part of the mainland. You can walk down here and along here if it's not too windy, and you can come right to the most westerly point of the British mainland here. There's a gap, so that's a bit more difficult to get to the other side. So if I take this point from Cape Wrath here, and if we zoom out a bit here, and we're going to go down to the summit of Ben Nevis, I'd like to point out here that I've positioned this summit from the exact longitude and latitude given for Ben Nevis. It's not necessarily clear on the satellite photos because the satellite is not necessarily vertically above the spot, you know, and so the image, when you've got high points, the images can be offset from their real GPS position. So the GPS position for the summit of Ben Nevis here is the one I've taken. And if we look at the angle given, you can see in the north corner, this is perfectly north-south, 180.00 degrees, 203.8 kilometers. So the Ben Nevis to Cape Wrath, exact Cape Wrath position, is a perfect north-south position. Now, again, you must admit, this is rather strange, 180 degrees. But what we're going to look at now is the relationship between the Bagnora and Clavicanes and Cape Wrath, because we can wonder why these cairns, let's put them on here, we can wonder why these cairns were positioned at this particular spot and not further away. So if we zoom in here, I'm going to put a point here on the southern cairn, and let's go back to Cape Wrath. Up we go to our point, and if you look at the angle here, now I'll be coming back to this triangle a little later. It's a triangle which is very popular with Robin Heath, who's talking here at Megalithomania. It's the 5, 12, 13 triangle. The exact angle is 337.38. That will be the exact angle for a 5, 12, 13 triangle. If I put my point here, 337.38. So if we zoom out a bit, you can see that it's very, very close to the exact point we took. Okay, and if we zoom back, we can see the size of this link here. So this is another strange thing. We'll be coming back to this 5, 12, 13 triangle a bit later. We know it's present at Stonehenge and different other places. It's what's called the second Pythagorean triangle. We'll be able to see how this triangle sets in with Ben Nevis, Cape Wrath and Balnuar and Clava Cairns. It's a 5, 12, 13. This is a 3, 4, 5. So if we multiply 3 by 5, this gives us a relationship 15, east-west, 20, 25, etc. This shows how there's an incredible whole number geometry linking Balnuar and Clava Cairns to Cape Wrath and Ben Nevis. So this is nothing to do with solstice angles or moon angles. This is pure geometry placed out in the landscape over the major natural features. So now I'd like to talk about the tallest megalith in Great Britain, the Redstone monolith. It's very well known, not visited all that much because it's a bit out of the way. It's not near other megalithic sites really. You have to go there on purpose. You can see it's a very thin stone with long sort of layers to it like this. A lead cap has been put on the top, nearly 8 meters tall, and it's in a graveyard here just near the church. This is the tallest standing stone in the British Isles, and it's part of a general landscape. Thanks to Chris Collier for a lot of information he's put on his site, Stone Circles, his website about stone circles. I think it's stonecircle.co.uk or something like that. The blue line here is what's called a winterborne stream. It's called the Gypsy Race. A winterborne stream is a stream which doesn't flow all the time. It flows from time to time. Sometimes it's dry and other times it flows. And this is a specific thing which is happening here at Redstone. Why is this happening? Because this is a chalk landscape. The bedrock here is chalk. This is the most northerly chalk bedrock landscape in Europe. Okay, so this is a specific geological speciality of this point, and there's been a lot going on here. There are different major mounds, Willahays, Wold Newton, and many others which I go into in the book. I talk about all the different sites around here, and the yellow structures here are the cursuses, which have been ploughed out. They're not really visible now, but they have been precisely located through archaeological excavations and by aerial photographs. They're perhaps not perfectly position. There's another one goes off here which I haven't put in, which goes off towards Bridlington in the east here. And so there was a lot going on around Redstone. The Redstone monolith is there, but there's a lot of other things. There's a henge monument here, Argham Henge. Now this landscape is very, very similar to the landscape in Avebury. Avebury is the River Kennet is also a winterborne stream. As you can see from the names of the northern branch here of the Kennet, goes through Winterbourne Basset, Winterbourne Monkton, and it flows down here to the west of Avebury, to the east of Silbury Hill, and gets down to Swallowhead Spring, where again it does a right angle towards the east, exactly as we saw in the previous, the Gypsy Race flows down from north to south and then does a right angle turn and goes off towards the east. Well, we get the same thing here in Avebury, where at the Swallowhead Spring will add its water to the north-south part of the River Kennet, and then this flows off, and this water will eventually flow through London. And we can see in the Avebury landscape here we have the West Kennet Avenue, so there's the same kind of thing. There were no megaliths on the avenues, on the cursuses in Redstone, but the countryside has been organised here. Okay, it's a very important thing to point out. Now, what I'm going to show you now is something particular between Willahays. First of all, the Willahays monument here. This is what it looks like today. Thanks Martin Dawes for the photograph. It looks like there are two hills. It's the largest Neolithic barrow on the Yorkshire Wolds, 50 metres long north-south, 40 east-west, and today 15 metres high. It used to be higher. 15 metres high is pretty high. It seems to have two summits, but that's because it's been excavated rather a lot. In the 19th century, Canon Greenwell excavated. He found no trace of human remains. I'd just like to say what he wrote about this. He says, throughout the whole course of my barrow explorations, he explored a very large number of barrows. He says, I've never met with anything that can compare with this mound. I'm forced to admit the possibility that this very large mass of chalk stones was thrown up merely to commemorate and not to contain the body of some great personage. It means basically he could find no central chamber, no indication of any kind of burial whatsoever. So this is a chalk mound like Silbury Hill, for example, where no chamber has ever been found. And it's made from blocks of chalk because we're on a chalk landscape. Okay, so there are very interesting links to be made here. But first of all, let's see the link between Willahays and Redstone. If we draw the line here, we can see that we get an angle of 323.13 degrees. This is 53.13 degrees north of west. It's again the exact angle of a 3-4-5 triangle, linking the Redstone monolith to the centre of Willahays over a distance of 5,875 metres. So I'd like just to show you this on Google Earth because it's very interesting to see exactly how it works. So let's go back to Google Earth. Let's go down to the Redstone monolith. There we go. So here you can see it in the churchyard with its long shadow. So if we put a point exactly on the Redstone monolith, there we are. Okay, and now we're going to go up to Willahays. Here's the barrow. And now look at this angle. You see I'm in the centre of Willahays. 323.13 degrees. So you can check up on that. And the measurement is, well, there, 5,874 meters. Okay, so this is perfect geometry to 1/100th of a degree, the angle of a 3-4-5 triangle. So you have to really begin to believe now that this is not coincidence, that these perfect angles of 3-4-5 triangles all over the British Isles and Brittany are not just coincidence, that this is part of a plan. These things were planned out, and we'll come back to this in a minute. Okay. I'd like now to show you another extract of the film, which is going to talk about another geometrical shape we find in Carnac, which is the triple square. 3 squares placed side by side. So this extract lasts about 5 minutes.
Toujours là?
Oui, toujours.
T'as vu des pas avec toi?
Non. Bon, on va dire qu'on n'a pas vraiment le même intérêt.
Oui, j'avais remarqué.
Mais cet après-midi, on va aller à Lorient, histoire de faire quelque chose qui lui plaise.
D'accord. Tu viens avec moi?
Ouais.
Ça te plaît ce que tu découvres ici?
Oui. Complètement, ouais. Je pensais pas que ça allait aussi loin.
Oui. Oui, c'est vrai que ça va très loin.
Oui.
T'es déjà venu ici au Mennec?
Non, c'est la première fois.
Ah oui, c'est l'endroit le plus visité par les touristes ici.
D'accord. Du coup, les alignements, ils suivent aussi la direction d'un 3-4-5?
Non, c'est différent, mais c'est relié. Ça donne une autre indication, c'est très intéressant.
Oui.
What is the angle of these parallel rows of menhirs in relation to the cardinal axes? A quick look will show us that the 11 alignments at Le Mennec West point exactly to the beginning of the 10 rows of alignments at Cermario, 1,466 meters away. The line furthest south in Le Mennec aims at the dolmen of Cermario. The next line aims at the most southern line at Carmario, and so on. The angle of these lines from north is 71.56 degrees. If we measure from the east-west axis, we get 18.44 degrees, which is precisely the angle of the diagonal of a triple square. We can measure exactly the same angle for the second and third lines. The menhirs in the alignments of Le Menec are aligned in this direction, as are the first stones at Carmario.
Un triple carré. Et qu'est-ce qu'il a de particulier alors ce triple carré?
Et ce qui est intéressant, c'est qu'il n'y a pas qu'ici qu'on trouve.
If we look at the Old Testament texts of the Bible, which represent the foundations of the Hebrew and Christian religions, written down perhaps in 700 BC, God himself is said to have introduced the right angle on earth in the instructions he gave verbally to Moses for the construction of his earthly dwelling. In this text, God gives his instructions for his tabernacle with great precision in the measurements and orientations on the cardinal axes. This building was open on the east side. It was 10 cubits wide, 10 cubits high, and 30 cubits long. Its ground plan was thus 1/3, a triple square. The tabernacle was divided into two parts. On the west side was the Holy of Holies, which was a cube with sides of 10 cubits. And on the east side was the Holy Place, which had the ground plan of the double square, 10 by 20 cubits. Later, perhaps around 1000 BC, Solomon used the same proportions and orientations for the construction of his famous temple. The ground plan had the same division into two parts, but was twice as large. Its height was multiplied by 3. The 40-cubit long double square on the ground generates a 3-4-5 triangle in the elevation of the walls, with a height of 30 cubits. The triple square and the 3-4-5 triangle were thus combined in Solomon's temple. In the Muslim religion, the great sacred place is the Kaaba in Mecca, a name which means cube in Arabic. These construction principles, squares and rectangles with proportions in whole numbers, oriented onto the cardinal directions, reserved for temples, for sacred and fixed places, positioned once and for all in a chosen location. They were different from the dwellings of the natural and living world, which is always in movement. According to these texts, their origin is not human but divine. So, who built the triple square of the Menec alignments in Carnac, which conforms to the same principles as Solomon's temple, 4,000 years before the Bible was written? But there is another secret hidden here. For the angle of the triple square is exactly half the angle of the 3-4-5 triangle. When the first line of the Lemenic megalithic alignments in Carnac arrives at the dolmen of Caermario, it doubles its inclination and runs along the first line of menhirs south of Caermario. This is extremely precise geometry in relation to the cardinal directions and on a gigantic scale. The distance of 1,466 meters between the first stones of the Lemenic lines and the first stones of the lines at Caermario is exactly 10 times the height of the Great Pyramid in Egypt, so it is a distance of 2,800 Royal Egyptian cubits. So after seeing how the triple square was used in Carnac, let's see how it was used in major megalithic sites in the British Isles. We're going to start off by looking at Silbury Hill, which is an incredible mound, not a burial mound because no bones of any kind or even any chamber has been found, and a pyramid-like mound made of blocks of chalk, up to 40 meters high, perfectly circular at the base and with a slope, and a very regular slope all the way up. And the Silbury Hill monument just near West Kennet Longbarrow is part of a fantastic landscape around Avebury and the west and the River Kennet. Thanks to L.A. Marsally for this drone shot of Silbury Hill. Now, just nearby, as you may know, is Avebury. The centre of the Avebury henge is at a latitude of 51.4287 degrees, which is 360 divided by 7. So the centre of Avebury henge is exactly 1/7 of the distance from the North Pole around the planet, 1/7 of the circumference of the Earth through its meridian. Now here we see Silbury Hill with a point at the centre of Silbury Hill, the centre of the base. The central point is determined by the base. I'll show you in a minute. And from here we have 3 lines which go off, 2 white lines and a red line which bisect the 2 white lines. And we'll see that they come up to Avebury henge, these 3 lines. The one on the left is perfectly north-south. So from the centre of Silbury Hill to the western limit of Avebury henge, which is now destroyed by building in the town, but as can clearly be seen, came down here beforehand. And the other side is at the base of the mound, the outer side of the mound. The path here is at the top of the bank, and the line here comes to the base of the bank. And so these 2 lines go from the centre of Silbury Hill to the 2 outer sides of the Avebury henge, and the red line exactly bisects that angle and comes perfectly to the centre, the central point of Avebury henge. And like I repeat, the one on the left here is perfectly north-south orientated. So this is the whole picture from the centre of Silbury Hill up to the mound here. And what we're going to discover is that this is a triple square. The angle from Silbury Hill, which incorporates Avebury henge, is the angle of a triple square, 18.44 degrees. And this is going to give us a very interesting geometrical organization, which I'll go into in a minute. But first of all, I'd just like to show you this on Google Earth. So here we are at Google Earth. Let's zoom down onto Silbury Hill. Here's the centre of Silbury Hill. Let's put the point here. Now, it may not look like this is the centre of Silbury Hill. I'm going to put a point on here, and I'm going to draw a circle. On the satellite image, it doesn't look like it's the centre, but this is because the satellite, when it took this photo, probably wasn't directly above Silbury Hill. The point I've put is the exact centre of the base circle of Silbury Hill. So you can see here that from this point here, we exactly englobe, we're going to go right round exactly the base of the hill. So if I go from here to the centre of Avebury. Let's put this on here to the centre of Avebury. We're going to discover an angle of 9.22 degrees. I must have missed the centre slightly at Avebury. Let's go back to the Silbury Hill. Yeah, I missed the centre. That's the central point. So we find an angle of 9.22 degrees. There we are. And a distance of 1,447.5 meters. Okay. So coming back to the overall view, then we see that if we take the distance of 1447.55 meters, I've taken this distance, and then we divide it by 2 pi, this will give us 230.38. By dividing by 2 pi, it's as if we consider this distance to be the circumference of a circle, and we want to find out what the radius is. And this distance of 230.38, if we divide it by 0.5236 meters, which is the length of the Royal Egyptian cubit, this gives us 440, showing that it's the side length of the Great Pyramid. So if we put the Great Pyramid in this position here, then that's going to enable us to find a certain geometry. I'll come back to this in a second, but first of all I'd like to talk about a crop circle that appeared here, it appeared on the 16th of July 2005. It left a mark in the ground which was still visible in Google Earth after ploughing, so you can go onto Google Earth and see exactly where this crop mark was, because the image is still in the archives of Google Earth. I've positioned it here on this diagram, the centre of it, and we discover then that its centre is due south of Avebury centre and twice the radius of the Avebury henge. And it is also on the line, one of the squares up from Silbury Hill. Okay, this is a triple square. So the centre is here, due south of Avebury, and half of that square is the diameter of the Avebury henge, right at the end of the henge here. And this represents a pyramid composed of 3 intertwined sevens. You can see it's like 3 sevens intertwined inside a circle and showing a pyramid shape, which is very, very interesting. And it's going to enable us to perhaps understand what this crop circle was actually saying here. Now, the geometry involved in this 9.22 degree angle is linked simply to a triple square. If we take a triple square and we take its diagonal, and then we add the length of the diagonal here to the 3 sides, so this becomes 3 plus the square root of 10, we have a rectangle which is 1 by 3 plus the square root of 10, which gives us a 9.22 degree angle. So this angle can be found via geometry. It's not just calculated. It's using the triple square and its diagonal. So the north-south side of the triple square can be seen to measure 1,428.8522 meters. This comes from this calculation here. And if we multiply by that by 7 and by 4, we get 40,000 zeros, or 7.864 meters, which is exactly 1,000th of the Earth's meridian. This is very important. We see that Avebury is at 1/7 of the Earth's meridian, which gives us the indication of the multiplication by 7. And the north-south distance between the centre of Avebury henge and the centre of Silbury Hill, this north-south distance, when multiplied by 7, gives us 1,000th of the distance between the equator and the North Pole. This is done with incredible precision, and it's using this specific geometry. So we understand then that the side length of the Great Pyramid, I've placed the Great Pyramid here, And we see the circle, if the side length is used, if one corner is the center of the circle and the side length is the radius, then we trace this circle here. We then extend it so it goes on this line, add this geometry, and we get the exact size of the Earth. So this is the first time that this information has been presented to the general public. And all this is in my book, of course, with details. If you want to go more into detail about this, it's obviously very clear indication of extremely precise knowledge about the size of the Earth in the far distant past. A nearby mound here our attention is attracted to this nearby mound by a local legend about Silbury Hill, which states that the devil was going to drop a bag of soil onto the inhabitants of Marlborough, but he was stopped by the priests of nearby Avebury, and so he dropped his mound of soil and it became Silbury Hill. Now this legend, or this folk tale, clearly links together Silbury Hill, Avebury and Marlborough. And here we have a picture of Marlborough Mound taken last year. The trees have been cleared off. You can see the stumps here. And so we get a much clearer view of this mound, which is on private property in Marlborough School. And so it's not very well known to the public, not often visited. But it seems to be linked through this legend to Silbury Hill and Avebury. Let's see how. What we're going to discover is that if we go from the exact same centre of Avebury to the centre of Marlborough Mound, we have first of all a distance of 8,232 metres, but the angle from east is 9.22 degrees, which gives us a perfect right angle between the line coming from Silbury to the centre of Avebury and the line going from the centre of Avebury to the centre of Marlborough Mound. Of course, over this distance, the precision is much greater, and this angle of 9.22 degrees is clearly perfectly proven here through this relationship. Now, the latitude of Marlborough Mound is not the same as the latitude of the centre of Silbury Hill. Silbury Hill is about 110 metres. The centre of Silbury Hill is 110 metres south of this latitude. And I've put the corner point here at the exact same latitude as Marlborough Mound for the geometry. I'm quite sure the builders knew about this, did this on purpose. And in my book, I give explanations on, I think, why this was done. Can't go into it all now. It's much more complicated. But it's very interesting to look into. We see that the distance from this point to the Avebury centre is 1,340 metres, which is a distance I've already talked about in Carnac. And the east-west distance, 8,340 metres, which is exactly 7,000 metres more. Okay, so let's have a look at this on Google Earth. Zoom in here to the centre of Avebury. Put a point here. And we now go down to the Marlborough Mound. Here we come to the centre of the Marlborough Mound. Let's put this on. And we see here that when we come to the centre of the Marlborough Mound, we're at 99, can we see 99.22 degrees, which is 90 plus 9.22 degrees. So we can see the exact angle of the same angle that links Silbury's centre to Avebury centre, links Avebury centre to Marlborough Mound to 1/100th of a degree precision, which of course is incredible information, okay, and which clearly confirms the geometry I've just shown. Now there's another thing which is interesting to look at here. If we come back to Marlborough Mound, I'm going to draw a line from Marlborough Mound to West Kennet, Long Barrow, I suppose most of you must know about West Kennet Longbarrow. Let's look at this. This line from Marlborough Mound goes straight down the centre of West Kennet Longbarrow. Can clearly be seen here. Okay, and if we take a line from here and from the arc of the Sarsen stones from the West Kennet, in front of the West Kennet Longbarrow, we come back to Avebury Centre here. We'll discover that this line is exactly at right angles to the line from West Kennet, and that this is going to create a second right angled triangle linking Avebury Centre, West Kennet Longbarrow and Marlborough Mound. After this first geometry, we come back to the West Kennet geometry here. The distance, of course, between Avebury and Marlborough Mound is still 8,232. We have the right angle at West Kennet, 15.74 degree angle opening, and this gives us particular geometry. The exact distance from the centre of Marlborough Mound to the very entrance of the West Kennet Longbarrow is 7,920 metres, which is 8 times 9 times 10 times 11, and it's also 110 units of 72 metres, and we have the geometry here, 31 units of 22 metres, 110 units of 72 metres, so it's 31 over 110, which gives this geometry. And again we see a strange relationship. The distance north between Avebury and West Kennet, 2,232 metres, is exactly 6,000 metres less than the distance between Avebury and Marlborough Mound. It's all very strange stuff. So coming back to our central point, which was the triple square relationship between Silbury Hill here and Avebury Centre, we're now going to extend this to a much greater scale. This same triple square, if extended to a much greater scale, comes to Redstone. This is rather incredible, and it can be seen to show some new information, which is very important. So the angle, the triple square is 1 by 3, as we've seen, and the diagonal is the square root of 10. Now, when we come up to Redstone, we'll see that the line from the centre of Silbury Hill on the exact angle of a triple square doesn't go exactly to the Redstone monolith. It's about 300 metres to one side of it. But if extended to this specific point here, it measures 316,227 metres. Now, why have I done that? Why have I traced this line to this specific point? Because the square root of 10 is 3.16227. And so this specific point here, right in the heart of the Redstone landscape, just near the Argham cursus, in the centre of these different cursuses here, this specific point here is exactly 100 kilometres due east of Silbury Hill and 300 kilometres due north. So we have a triple square with units of 100 kilometres, which is rather interesting. And then another interesting point is just south of this point here. If I go from this specific point to Castle Rig, the Castle Rig stone circle, which we saw at the beginning of the talk, I have again 18.44 degrees, which gives us a precise triple square to Castle Rig. This gives this geometry here. The Silbury to Redstone triple square, and then the Redstone to Castle Rig triple square, one on top of the other, and gives another right angle here between Silbury Hill, Redstone and Castle Rig. The relationship is approximately, not exactly, but very close to 3 to 5 as far as distances are concerned. I've put in another relationship here. This is for Robin Heath, who I'm sure will be very interested in this one. This is between Bryn Celtic Ddu in Anglesey and the Redstone monolith. We discover here that the angle here is exactly the angle of a 5, 12, 13 triangle. This is rather astounding, and I'll show you actually on Google Earth. It'd be good to see on Google Earth exactly where this comes to. Okay, here's the Bryn Celtic Ddu. If I put a point here at the center of this and we go back to Redstone, we'll see that the exact point of the 5, 12, 13, which is 67.38, arrives here. It comes to a spot around here, 67.38 degrees. So that's 22.62 degrees from east-west. So that's the exact angle. Now let's go to Silbury Hill, and from Silbury Hill we'll put a point up and we'll come exactly then to Redstone up here. So here's the Redstone monolith, but if I ignore that and come up to the point where the line arrived, the exact line comes from Bryn Celtic Ddu, we'll see here that I have 18.44 degrees. So this is the exact angle of a triple square. And then if I take the line from this point again, from here to Castlerig, again we have 18.43. Remind you that the angle is 18.435 degrees, so 4443. Right? So here we are. Castlerig is exactly on a triple square from that point. Come back to the Redstone monolith and Silbury to Redstone. There we go. So we see, in fact, how the exact geometry from Silbury Hill, from Bryn Celtic Ddu and to Castlerig arrives precisely exactly at this specific spot, not at the point of the Redstone monolith. I'm not saying that the Redstone monolith is not in its right place. It's in its right place because I've shown in my book how it's linked to all the local geometry, and all the sites around are perfectly linked exactly. We saw earlier with Willahays, the 345 triangle is perfectly linked geometrically to all the sites around it. But I'm beginning to think that there may have been another point here. We can see, in fact, that the farmer can't actually work this plot of land here. He's ploughing this, you can see, and he's working around this spot. Was there at some point a mound here which has disappeared? Was there something else? But this point seems to be a very specific geometrical point linking the sites together. Very exact 1/100th of a degree geometry linking these different places. And here we see it on the major plan, right? I'd just briefly like to talk about the Devil's Arrows. I go much deeper into this in my book, The Devil's Arrows and the Thornborough Rings. But the Devil's Arrows are on the same parallel as Redstone, exactly due west of Redstone. And the Devil's Arrows are the second tallest megaliths in the British Isles after the Redstone monolith. So the fact that the highest megaliths in Great Britain are on the same east-west line must be taken into consideration. And what we discover is that they're on a double square angle from Castlerig. Now, the most northerly Devil's Arrows, there are 3 megaliths. They're not exactly aligned. The most northerly and southerly are on a perfect double square between each other from north, and from Castlerig to the most northern standing stone of the Devil's Arrows, we get a double square. Now, what we see here is that the double square from Castlerig to the Devil's Arrows does not exactly come over the triple square going from Redstone to Castlerig, although the north-south distance is the same. The reason for this, of course, is linked to the Earth's curvature. In one case, we're going from Redstone to Castlerig, which means that the line curves in one direction, and when we come from Castlereagh down back, it curves in the other direction, and you can't put perfect geometry, planar geometry, on a spherical surface. It's bound to be slightly deformed. And it would seem to me that the megalithic builders, again I go into this in the book, it would seem to me that the megalithic builders have incorporated these differences linked to the Earth's curvature to make their whole system fit together. So this is a general plan of the whole thing with different measurements. I'd like to come back to this double square. I showed in a previous talk at Megalithomania how in Carnac the Menic East alignments were double square orientated and pointed towards the beginning of the West alignments at a perfect double square angle. Here again we see the different angles linked to the double square. For example, here 243.44 degrees. And if we come to the come back to the aerial photographs, satellite photographs, we see how the line going through the most northerly line of the Carnac alignments here, 243.44 degrees, then goes right down. Now wait a minute, I'm blocking this, so I'll just come off screen a bit, and you can see it goes down to the first stone of the Lemenic West alignments, and this is the exact angle of a double square. Okay, so this double square is clearly presented again in the Carnac alignments. I've shown it in Carnac in Egypt. This is the solstice angle for Carnac in 1300 BC. We have Carnac Temple here, which is said on Wikipedia to be orientated east-west. Can clearly be seen here that it's orientated at 116.56 degrees from north. Perfect angle of a double square. Okay, this is the central axis, 360 meters, exactly 360 meters long, the central axis of the Carnac Temple. I've also shown the double square in Stonehenge. These are the 4 stones of what's called the station stone rectangle. These 4 station stones were placed in the first phase of Stonehenge on the Aubrey circle, which are these 56 post holes in a circle around a specific central point. And this specific central point positioned these 4 stones, which form a 5 by 12 rectangle, 5 units by 12 units. And what I've shown in a previous talk is how the 2 stones which have disappeared are linked together by a perfect triple square, and the 2 station stones remaining are linked together by a double square, which is on the east-west. This one is east-west orientated and this one north-south. Okay, so the 4 station stones were positioned in this way. Anybody can check up. These station stones are visible on Google Earth, so you can clearly go in and check up the exact angle of the double square going between these 2 station stones. For the first time, I'd like to present a new example of the double square. This is in Portugal, between the 2 most important monuments in Portugal. Here you can see the Zambujeiro Dolmen near Évora. This is an incredible monument which any megalithomaniac should visit. This is the entrance chamber here. You go in, so here's the cover stone over the entrance. This is already 1.80 meters or 2 meters high. And then you come to the chamber, which is composed, I think, of 9 massive stones over 5 meters high, all touching each other, which create a chamber. You're in this chamber with these enormous stones all around you. It's really quite incredible. and there used to be a cover stone on top of this. How on earth this was done is, nobody knows. It's now covered over by a sort of metal roof, which isn't very, aesthetic, to say the least. Near this is the Almendres cromlech, or stone circle. There are dozens and dozens of stones here, these sort of rounded stones. They're on a slope. The slope slopes down to the east. So if you go there at sunrise, you can see the sunrise in the distance near equinox, see the sunrise along in the center of this cromlech. It's a beautiful thing to see. And this is the major site in Portugal, basically. So these are the two major sites in Portugal. Here's their relationship to each other, the link, the connection. And this is a perfect double square between the chamber of the Zambujeiro dolmen and the center of the Almendres cromlech, the angle of a perfect double square. So I definitely invite you to look into this. You can check up for this yourself on internet. I don't have time to show it all to you, but it's quite precise. To finish this talk, I would like to talk about Drofdwyl near Stranraer in Scotland, which has been excavated quite intensively over the past 20 years. It's a very important site. It's put on a par with Avebury. It's a massive landscape which was clearly very well organised, and it dates back a long time. Some of the findings go back to the Mesolithic period. This particular mound, I'll come back to it in a second, the Drofdwyl mound. It was thought to be a medieval motte, and then it was excavated and discovered to be Neolithic. It's 50 by 60 meters at its base. It was excavated by Julian Thomas, who gives extremely good details, thousands of details of all the work that's been done there are given in this specific book here. It's very, very detailed. Every post hole is detailed with a diagram, explanations, right? So he excavated the mound at the same time to redate it, because it was discovered that the one of the major monuments is 3 concentric circles of post holes with a kind of corridor entrance here that can be seen, and it was seen that this corridor entrance pointed straight to the Drofdwyl mound, and that inspired Julian Thomas to go and excavate the Drofdwyl mound to see when it really dated to, and then it was discovered it was Neolithic, and so that it was perfectly linked. So we can see at this scale how there was landscape orientation going on here. I don't have the exact orientation of this corridor, so I haven't done any geometry on it, but it was very interesting to look into, of course. There were other excavations done a little to the north of here. A Drumflower, a place called Drumflower, massive post holes found along the road here. Come back to this a bit later. And another circle here with an entrance. And they can be seen. This is the Dunragit area with the circles and the Drofdwyl mound. And here the Drumflower circle, and we can see the road going along here. This is the new bypass which was built through here, so we can see it's a large scale site. Now, if we go on Wikipedia to see about the Drofdwyl, it's written Drofdwyl moat, but it's now more prefer to call it Drofdwyl mound. What's said about it is the mound was built with step sides, like Silbury Hill, and it says the most well-known parallel erection of the mound was 1600 BC. It was 1600 BC, and it was 1600 BC. It was 1600 BC, and 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 it was site the site has is Silbury Hill in Wiltshire, but in size it's much closer to less well-known sites at Conkerbarrow, Willahays and Wold Newton. Okay, now sometimes my work is criticised by people who say that I choose the sites I want to and I can find geometrical relationships between any old sites, that anybody can find geometrical relationships, just need to choose the right sites. Here what I'm going to do is take the sites shown here on Wikipedia, which are mentioned specifically to be linked to Droftwheel Mound by their nature, the fact that there are no burials and that they're mounds of a specific size. So let's see if we can find specific relationships between these different points. Okay, so we go back to Google Earth and we're going to look into the relationship between these monuments, the connections between these monuments. So we're going to start at Silbury Hill, and if I take the point at the centre of Silbury Hill here and I go up to Droftwheel Mound, here's the area, here's Droftwheel Mound. If I go to the centre of Droftwheel Mound, we get an angle of 333.47 degrees. Now, this angle of 333.47 is only 3/100ths of a degree away from a triple square, 333.44. That's 360 minus 26.56. So that's the exact angle of a double square, a double square. And if I extend this line up to the drumflower area, we discover that the drumflower area, where we found the post holes and the circle, is exactly on a double square line from Silbury Hill. Okay, so that's quite interesting. Now, let's go back to Silbury Hill. Let's take another example. Another example given was Conkerbarrow. Not a very well-known site. It's kind of stuck between a field and a housing estate. It's near Dorchester. So let's go from Silbury Hill down to the centre of Conkerbarrow. Here it is. And look at the angle, 206.56 degrees. That's 180 plus 26.56 degrees. So that's the exact angle of a double square. You can see how Conkerbarrow is here between this housing estate and the field. There was a massive henge here, which has been virtually ploughed out of existence. Okay, but the remaining barrow is there. These barrows are virtually unmovable. You see, even with farming and building, the barrows managed to survive. So, like Silbury Hill, like Droftwheel Mound, and like many others. And so this shows incredible double square, totally precise double square geometry between the centre of Silbury Hill and the centre of Conkerbarrow. Okay, so these are sites that have been taken off Wikipedia. All right. The last thing we're going to check up at is the link between Droftwheel Mound, come back to Silbury Hill, and up to Willahays. There we go, to the centre of Willahays. Oh, if I can zoom out a bit. Now we see that this is at an angle of 17.64 degrees from north. We saw that Redstone was at the triple square angle. Redstone is here, 18.44. So we're slightly less of an angle here up to Willahays, 17.64 degrees. Okay, so what is this angle? I'll come back to this in a second, but first of all, what I'd like to do is now go from the Willahays mound back to the Dunrudged area, and if we come down to here, which is the Drumflower zone where I took the line up to earlier, we see that the angle is 287.64 degrees. This is 270 plus 17.64 degrees. So this angle is exactly the same angle from west as the angle from Silbury Hill to Willahays is from north. So that creates a perfect right angle at Willahays, between Silbury Hill, Willahays and Dunradget. And this is the point which was on the double square from Silbury Hill. So this is incredibly precise geometry on an enormous scale, linking places together. To finish my talk, I'm going to talk about Lindisfarne, because in my book I show how I believe that Lindisfarne was a cultural centre which had managed to preserve this ancient knowledge and had written it down in the oldest books, some of the oldest books known, the Lindisfarne Gospels, which date to the end of the 8th century, the 7th century, end of the 7th century. And they are the Gospels, but there are incredible drawings, Celtic designs and pages called the cross-carpet pages. And in these designs we can discover exactly the same geometry being used as what I've presented here, and I show this in the book. But Lindisfarne is also very important because it is perfectly due north of Silbury Hill. I go into the exact measurements here. The measurements are the same as the measurements that can be found in Carnac. And Lindisfarne seems to have an incredible importance. And what we discover is that from the Droftwheel Mound to Lindisfarne is again a double square. Okay, so lots of things fit in. This is the Concabarrow double square with its measurements. And this gives us the Willahays angle. Okay, now this angle of 17.64 degrees is in fact a relationship of 1 over pi. What this means is that if you take a triple square, then you have sides of 1 by 3. But if you extend the 3 side to the length of pi, 3.14, so you have something which is 1 by 3.14, you get an angle of 17.64 degrees. So it's the ratio of 1 to pi on a geometrical basis. So here we can see the relationship Silbury Hill, Willahays and Droftwheel Mound linked together by this geometry. And what we discover as far as the distances are concerned is that the relationship Droftwheel Mound to Willahays, 303,580 meters, and the distance between Silbury Hill and Willahays, 318,759, is a 20 to 21 relationship. This is a whole number relationship over all this distance, and that is another Pythagorean triangle, the 20, 21, 29 triangle. Okay, so I'm going to end my talk here, let you go and have some dinner, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. You can find out all the details about this in the megalithic plan. I'll show you how Cape Wrath, which we saw earlier, is a central point which links together Lindisfarne and Redstone, Castlerig and Avebury, and then monuments down through Dunradget, Cangoedig, Lundy Island, Castle Door. All these connections are detailed in the book, which is now available only on epistemia.co.uk. It's my publisher's website. It's a secured site. You can pay in pounds. If you're interested in studying the incredible information I've just given you in this talk, you can get all the details and see much more. Also on the Epistemia website, you can find talks in DVD form or online, and different books I've written about Carnac. Thanks very much for listening. Bon appetit. See you sometime. Bye.
Thank you so much, Howard. That was fantastic. We really appreciate that amazing lecture. So Howard's going to be joining us. So the first question here is from Francisco. And he says there is a theory that explains natural alignments of Camario, Stonehenge, and in the Glenfold of Scotland, saying they are plasma cord phenomena, similar to the so-called Steve Aurora, interpreted in ancient times by a Skybo or Ishtar necklace. And he thinks the orientation of monuments near the scars would be with the plasma cord, and when it does not hit the earth. Do you know about this?
I vaguely heard about it. Hello, everybody. I vaguely heard about it. I haven't studied it, but I have heard about it. People have already told me about it recently, fairly recently. But there must be something. I don't know what it is. There must be something behind this. So that's possible.
Okay. Well, we can open it up at lunch as well. So Juliet G. She's got a couple of points here. Firstly, big thank you. I think his job is amazing. A few questions here. You said that most of the megaliths, 90%, have disappeared. So she has two questions. What are the sources, and how do you know the exact location of these? And how do you know the accuracy, and how can you be sure that your conclusions are based on these exact locations?
Yeah, the figure of 90% isn't my figure. It's a figure that's given by the archaeologists who work in the Carnac area. It's linked to the fact that a lot of the megaliths have disappeared recently. In other words, there are records of megaliths which can no longer be found. There was a lot of destruction after the French Revolution, enormous amounts of destruction. I've found traces. It's quite interesting. There was a dig in Plouanel last year where they discovered remains of an alignment going from Plouanel to Carnac, and that alignment was spoken about in a book in 1847. It was said it's a secret for no one that over 2,000 standing stones have disappeared between Plouanel and Carnac. And so this dig has just brought to light some of them, which are still underground, but most of them were smashed up to make houses and stuff. So many of the things that have disappeared are on record. Others are underwater. This is an enormous... In the film, I show on the beach, I show a drone flying over the beach. Maybe people didn't know what was going on. There are, in fact, alignments you can see. Of course, they look like rocks on the beach, but those are fallen alignments. And so, so for the first part, that's how we know that so much has disappeared, because there are a lot of sources. And how do I know about the accuracy? The accuracy conclusions based on the exact location. Well, this is the thing. There's another thing as well. Not only have megaliths disappeared, some have actually appeared. Some people actually added megaliths into the Carnac alignments. I've got photographs. I happen to have a collection of the oldest photographs of the megaliths done by Felix Gaillard in the 19th century from 1870 onwards, and you can see photos, you can see stones which have appeared since then. So you have to be very, very careful when you're doing this work, not to make sure that these stones are in their original positions. And I've basically made sure. I've had a lot more time to do this. I've been living in the Carnac area for 35 years. When Professor Tom came here, he came for short stays, and so he didn't have the time to do that. I've had the time to check up and make sure that all the stones I've been working on are in their exact same positions. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We've got another one from Paul Burley. Could you comment on the dates of certain monuments as nodes to various triangles? Are the geometries developed over many years or centuries? And if so, how is that explained with regard to different cultures developing their different monuments?
Yeah, this, of course, is a very tricky one. The question about time and dates. Hang on, I'll just have a drink. I was very interested last night in the talk by Mike Parker Pearson. All the details and all the study that the DNA enables one to do now. But it's very mysterious to see how all these very sick people, I mean, they all had bone disease and they were all dying very young, but they were all taking on massive treks across the countryside to build enormous monuments, you know, which is good, very good for ill people, you know. There's something rather strange about all this. But as far as the dates are concerned and the timing's concerned, it seems to me quite clear that things were carried on over millennia. Things were passed down. And I'm quite sure if I look at Carnac, for example, the oldest monuments, the Grand Menhir Brisé, the giant standing stone, the Tumulus Saint-Michel, these are all dated about 4,700 BC. The major monuments are the oldest, and they seem to have really positioned the general setup. And then things were kind of filled in over the centuries, over the millennia even. So the question of Silbury Hill is very interesting, and that the spot, which is the center of Silbury Hill, must have been an important point before Silbury Hill was built, in my opinion. So I don't know if I've answered all the elements of his question.
That's good enough. We've got a question from Stephanie. It's actually, I think you just answered the next question to Stephanie regarding how it was passed down from generations. So we'll go to Bernard de Groot's question. Excellent work as always, very convincing. Do you have any idea of how these long distance locations were located?
No, well, no particular proof or no elements of any kind. I mean, it leaves a lot open to imagination, doesn't it? When you see how Castlereagh is perfectly positioned exactly due north of this longest line going through Brittany. I've gone into this north-south axis of Brittany quite a lot in other places because in the Mabinogion, it's quite clearly pointed out when they're talking about the different, in the Lud and Levelis story, they talk about it's question of different plagues which hit Britain and how he gets instructions, King Lud gets instructions, and he is told to create, to build something at the junction point between the longest north-south line and the longest east-west line he can find in the island of Britain, which is in fact Avebury, right? But in Brittany, this longest north-south line is perfectly north-south. It's very, very strange, this question, you know. And it's so strange. You understand these two isthmuses, which are perfectly north-south of each other, which are considered to be natural, and which are on the longest north, from the most northerly point of Brittany to the most southerly point of Brittany on a perfect north-south line. That's very, very strange. And so it takes us into a kind of realm where ordinary explanation becomes, you know, well, it's just, you just go beyond ordinary explanation. It's something we can't explain, really, to tell you the truth. So there could be hundreds of explanations. You know, we could talk about all sorts of things, but I don't know which of them is true.
Okay, all right, good. We've got a couple of questions that are quite similar from Kate Masters and also from Katie Ball, and they're generally asking, you know, why were they doing it? And it appears like, and Katie mentioned, there's something like a grid system. What were they? You know, what was the fundamental purpose of this? That answers like 2 or 3 questions in one go.
Right, I go into this in my book. I think it's written down in the Mabinogion when around the year 1000, when everybody thought they were going to die, the ancient folk tales were written down in the Welsh bardic tales, the Mabinogion, and they actually go into why the megaliths were built, really. And it's linked. They talk about dragons which are fighting each other. There's a European dragon fighting with a British dragon, and this creates a terrible kind of scream which sends women barren and people go mad. It sounds a lot like earth energies meeting forces, earth energies which create negative influences and send people crazy and have all kinds of bad effects. And it is quite clearly said in the Mabinogion that all these this installation was built to counteract that. And what's interesting in the Mabinogion is it's said that the information comes from France, which is, you know, there's a big link here, which I show in my book. I've shown 1 or 2 links in the talk, but there are north-south meridian lines going from the major sites in Brittany, from right at the end of Finistère to Nantes. There are these meridian lines linking to the major sites in Britain. And so the thing is on a scale which is bigger than the British Isles. It includes Brittany as well. And I haven't looked into Ireland at all for the time being. Very sorry about this to any Irish people might be watching. It's not that I don't consider the Irish monuments, but it's just I started when I've been able to, you know. But I think it's very probably linked to the fact that the Earth is a sick planet, that we have a lot of problems in internal, you know, Earth problems, probably linked to comets or things that have disturbed the Earth's balance. And that these people are actually building things to try and sort that out.
Okay. There's a quick question, another one from Stephanie. How did they measure it? How did they measure it? How do they measure stuff over the landscape?
Yeah, no idea. No, I have no idea. I mean, what I introduced in my talk there is the use of the meter, the fact that Redstone is exactly 100 meters east and 300 kilometers, 100 kilometers east and 300 kilometers north. I introduced the meter length, which officially was introduced by Napoleon.
Yeah.
I've quite clearly shown you can quite easily find the meter length in Versailles, which was built 100 years before Napoleon was born. And the meter length was probably one of the most secret measurements. I suppose they got it off the king by torturing him for a year before they cut his head off. But I think that the meter length was a very ancient measurement, and that at the French Revolution, they introduced it as a kind of general universal measurement to try and say this is the end of secrecy in some way. But I think it's you know, today it's seen of as a kind of modern measurement that invades everything, especially by people who love the British foot, which I also love. You know, I still measure in feet in my head, but the meter seems to be a very ancient measurement. In fact, I've shown its existence very, very clearly in Carnac in 4700 BC. So how was it measured? I think the meter length anyway was a measurement that was used, that's enough really for me to be classified as a nutcase.
There's been a few comments about why you use the meter. I think you've just covered that.
Yeah.
I've got just a couple more, then we'll open it up for the lunch. Kerry mentions the Mabinogion, and this is, she asks about, it encodes astronomical knowledge. Do you know that? Well, clearly you do, because you mentioned that, and that's also in the book. So that's an interesting one. But let's ask. Rob Black asks about the carvings of Rufting Lynn, and these might be a map of some of these alignments, and because it's near Lindisfarne. Have you heard of Rufting Lynn?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, you might want to check that out. That's from Rob Black.
Somebody was talking about Duddo 5 stones during the previous talk, Gail Higginbottom's talk. Somebody talked about Duddo 5 stones. The Duddo 5 stones are exactly due west of the Pacific spot on Lindisfarne, where these different links, these lines link. The Duddo 5 stones are part of it, but I've not heard of that. Yeah, I'll look into that.
Okay, there's a couple of comments here about, Nicholas Collerstrom asks, when is Stonehenge New Revelations available again on your website? But these kind of things you can ask Howard in the comments, and also Roma, as people are trying to order, have a couple of problems.
Yeah,
but
I'm very, very sorry about this. A very strange sort of thing has happened, is that people trying to buy the book on the website can't actually pay. When they get to the payment part, it turns in, they can't actually pay. What you should do is get that far and then abandon the thing, because on the website you'll have your email address, and as soon as the problem's fixed, then you'll get an email telling you that it's okay and you can do it again. Very sorry about that.
I think Juliet G says if you use the French version of the website, it tends to work. So if people want to check that out. But I do recommend everyone. We're going to have to jump over to the lunch break here, everybody. But all the questions in the Q&A, please come in to the lunch break. Put your hand up, please. Press the raise hand button. Howard will stay on if that's okay, Howard.